Good afternoon, Mr. Speaker and House. The motion today is this House regrets globalization. As side proposition first speaker, I support this motion. The ebb and flow of history and politics repeatedly portrays the inevitability of globalization, but inevitable doesn't mean desirable. The definitions that we will be applying to the key terms in this debate are revolving around globalization, which we will be defining as the increasing integration and interdependence among nations and their societies in the world. And the context that we're going to be giving to this debate is the recent events such as Brexit, the Brexit referendum, when Britain decided to leave the EU, the election of Donald Trump in the US, and the popularity of politicians such as Marine Le Pen. These events all show us that there is an increased animosity that has started to develop against globalization, which is a deeply controversial topic as it is, and it has become increasingly prevalent as people's perceptions have become to be more negative of it. My burden of proof today is that globalization is regrettable. Its harmfulness outweighs its benefits. Even though we can't stop it, because the way that the world revolves and the way that politics works, it is inevitable and it is something that we cannot stop. It is something that is regrettable. I have two arguments today. The first is the impact of globalization on terrorism, and the second is the impact of globalization on public political opinion. I will now be moving on to my first point, which is its impact on terrorism. The technologies that are spread by globalization are often cited as one of the pros of globalization because it spreads greater technologies to the rest of the world. So advanced American devices will be spread to maybe poorer countries such as South Africa. But these technologies have also been used to, combat terrorism and used in counterterrorism operations. But these technologies also can be exploited by terrorist groups. So they enable terrorist groups to conduct operations that are deadlier and more widely distributed than previously. And also these operations are harder to combat than before the rise of technologies that are spread even further by globalization. So an example of this would be ISIS. ISIS have used social media incredibly effectively and YouTube incredibly effectively to spread their radical messages. And part of the danger of ISIS is that not only do they have homegrown terrorists who have grown up in the countries that ISIS is situated in, namely Iraq and Syria, but there are also instances of a man or a person who has grown up in California, who's lived in California his entire life, or Belgium, and because of what they've been exposed to by technologies that have been in increased use and more widely spread because of globalization, people who have no link really to ISIS are being radicalized. And because with terrorist groups, the effects of globalization allow their messages to be more easily spread. People are more easily converted because of this, and radical views are more easily accessible for those who may be more inclined to view them. Specifically, a lot of teenagers who are quite lost and are going through adolescent tough times are usually seen as being easily radicalized by what they see on social media on ISIS. My second point is public political opinion. As mentioned before, this is shown by Brexit, Trump's election, and Marine Le Pen's popularity, and this is also linked to terrorism and the rise of alt-right politics, because xenophobia and racism become more prevalent. The multiculturalism, which is a benefit of globalization, makes people feel threatened as they feel as though the sovereignty of the states is being undermined by globalization. And globalization is advancing too rapidly for people to adapt effectively and peacefully. So this leads to hate speech, hate attacks, violence, and an escalation of opposing ideologies. We're not being given time, a lot of citizens aren't being given time to adapt sufficiently to globalization.